April is closer than you think, and right now on your Windows 11 machine, a setting is active that Microsoft quietly expanded. And most people have absolutely no idea it's running. Not a third-party app, not a browser extension that snuck in. Something baked directly into the operating system itself, enabled by default, continuously collecting data from your screen, your keystrokes, your files, and your activity. And the window to do something about it, before the next major update cycle locks more of this in, is narrowing fast. I've been digging into this for weeks. I tested it, I read the researcher reports, I watched the regulatory filings, and what I found genuinely surprised me. So before April, before millions more users get pulled deeper into this without realizing it, let me show you exactly what's happening on your machine, what Microsoft is actually doing with it, and how to shut it down for good. Let's pull back the curtain on exactly what we're dealing with, because once you see it laid out clearly, you'll understand why security researchers started raising alarms the moment this rolled out. The primary setting at the center of this is called Recall, Microsoft's AI-powered photographic memory feature that was introduced as a headline capability of Copilot Plus PCs. And here's what it actually does in plain language. It takes a screenshot of your screen every few seconds, continuously, in the background. Right now, if you're on eligible hardware, while you're reading this, while you're working, while you're typing credentials into your banking app, while you're filling out a medical intake form, while you're reading a private message from someone who trusted you with sensitive information, Recall is potentially snapshotting all of it. It captures those images, processes them using on-device AI to extract text and identify content, and then stores everything in a searchable local database so you can theoretically recall anything you've done on your computer at any point in the past. Microsoft's pitch is that this is a convenience feature. You type, "Show me that spreadsheet I was editing last Tuesday," and Recall surfaces it. They want you to think of it as a personal search engine for your own computer history. And in isolation, that sounds potentially useful. But think carefully about what that requires architecturally. It requires a system that never stops watching your screen. Every browser tab you open, every document you scroll through, every field that auto-populates with, a saved password, every conversation in your messaging app, every sensitive document your employer shares with you, all of it captured, all of it indexed, all of it stored. And Microsoft, at launch, said this data never leaves your device. It's all local. That was the first claim. Then security researchers got their hands on it, and that's when things got uncomfortable. Kevin Beaumont, a former Microsoft security researcher who now operates independently and maintains one of the most respected security analysis blogs in the industry, was among the first people to do a thorough technical examination of Recall after its initial preview rollout. What he found was damning. The Recall database, the file containing all those indexed screenshots and extracted text, was stored in a location accessible to any application running under your standard user account. No administrator-level permissions required. In practical terms, that meant any piece of software on your machine, a Trojanized app, a browser-delivered script, a piece of malware that landed through a phishing email, could silently read the entire Recall database. Not just what was on your screen at that moment, but everything Recall had been collecting for however long it had been running. Your banking session history, your email contents, passwords that had appeared in form fields. Beaumont described the database as a treasure trove for attackers and published his technical findings publicly. The backlash was significant enough that Microsoft temporarily pulled the rollout. But here's what got buried in the follow-up coverage. Microsoft patched the permission structure, and then they shipped it anyway. Recall came back. And with Windows 11's 2024 and early 2025 updates, it began rolling out more broadly, not just to the premium Copilot Plus hardware it launched with, but progressively through feature updates that increasingly touch a wider range of machines as Microsoft continues its Copilot integration push. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, one of the most credible and longest-standing digital rights organizations in the world, not a fringe privacy blog, an organization that has successfully litigated against the NSA, issued a public statement calling Recall a privacy nightmare and explicitly urging users to disable it. The UK's Information Commissioner's Office, which is the government body responsible for data protection enforcement in Britain, opened a formal inquiry into whether Recall complied with data protection law. France's CNIL privacy regulator issued similar concerns. Germany's data protection authorities flagged it. These aren't voices you dismiss. These are institutional watchdogs that move carefully and conservatively. And they moved fast on this. Independent security testing by researchers at Malwarebytes Labs confirmed that even after Microsoft's permission patches, the Recall database remains a target for credential harvesting malware, one of the fastest growing attack categories in their 2025 annual threat report. And look, if you're thinking I'm careful, I don't click suspicious things, I'm not at risk, I understand that instinct, but Malwarebytes' data shows that a significant portion of credential harvesting infections arrive through compromised legitimate websites and malvertising. You don't have to do anything wrong, you just have to browse. If someone compromises your machine through a single malicious ad on a legitimate news site, through one phishing link in an email that looked legitimate, they don't just get what's on your screen at that moment. With recall running, they potentially get weeks or months of your entire screen history, your passwords, your banking, your medical records, your private messages. Think about what that means for you specifically. That's not a theoretical scenario. That's the attack surface recall creates. And it's sitting on your machine right now. Now stay with me here, because I want to be precise about something important before we get to the solutions. Recall on Copilot Plus PCs, the dedicated machines with neural processing units from manufacturers like Qualcomm, AMD, and Intel's newest generation, is the primary concern for people on that hardware. But there is a second layer to this that affects far more Windows 11 users, including people on hardware that will never see recall. It lives in a setting called diagnostic data that most people have never looked at closely. In Windows 11's 23H2 and 24H2 updates, Microsoft quietly expanded what gets collected under the optional diagnostic data toggle. When that's set to optional or full rather than required, Windows is continuously transmitting a substantially larger picture of your behavior, application usage patterns, browsing behavior from Edge, search queries entered into the Windows search bar, interaction logs, and what Microsoft calls inking and typing data, which is a polite way of saying samples of what you type, intended to improve AI keyboard prediction models. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh's School of Informatics conducted network traffic analysis on Windows 11 builds and published their findings in late 2024. They ran controlled tests, capturing all outbound network traffic from fresh Windows 11 installations, and documented the scope of what gets transmitted to Microsoft telemetry endpoints under different diagnostic settings. Their conclusion? The volume and specificity of data transmitted under optional diagnostic data is substantially larger than what Microsoft's official documentation describes. The paper is publicly available if you want to read it. I'll say in the comments where to find it. The point is that this isn't speculation. This is documented, peer-reviewed, network-level traffic analysis showing what Windows 11 is actually sending. And most of it, most people opted into without realizing it, simply because optional was the default, and the explanation of what it includes was written in language designed not to alarm you. Here's a detail I want to dwell on for a moment, because it speaks to how these systems are built. When you first set up Windows 11, you're presented with a series of screens asking for your preferences. The language used is deliberately warm and benefit-forward. Help improve Microsoft products, get personalized tips and recommendations, allow Microsoft to use your diagnostic data to improve your experience. Each of those phrases is technically accurate. They just don't tell you the other side of the sentence, that improving Microsoft products involves analyzing behavioral data at scale, that personalized recommendations require building a profile of your usage patterns, that the diagnostic data they want permission to use includes far more than system crash logs. The consent architecture is designed to maximize opt-in. That's not accidental. That's UX designed by teams who know that framing, word choice, and default selection dramatically affect how many users agree. In privacy law terms, there's a genuine debate about whether this constitutes meaningful informed consent at all, but the practical reality is most people clicked through those setup screens in 30 seconds and have been running with those defaults ever since. Here's the thing that really got under my skin when I dug into this. This wasn't a bug, it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a glitch in the update pipeline. These are deliberate architectural decisions made by people who knew exactly what they were designing. And to really understand why, you need to understand what Microsoft is building and what it needs to build it successfully. Microsoft's entire strategic direction for the next decade is AI, not incrementally, fundamentally. Satya Nadella has staked the company's future on it publicly and repeatedly. Copilot is being woven into every product Microsoft ships: Windows, Office, Teams, Azure, Dynamics, Xbox. And building large AI models that actually work well, that understand context, predict user behavior accurately, generate useful suggestions, and stay relevant across workflows requires enormous quantities of real-world behavioral data, not synthetic data, not focus group data, real data about how humans actually use computers hour by hour, what they search for, what they write, how they navigate between applications, what errors they make and how they correct them, what documents they reference together, what kind of browsing patterns precede what kind of purchase decisions. That data is extraordinarily valuable, not just for improving the products you're using, though that's the official public framing, but as a competitive moat that's almost impossible to replicate if you don't have access to a billion-user install base already running your operating system. Google built its AI advantage on search data. Meta built its on social data. Microsoft's Play is the operating system. You're not just a Windows user. In the architecture of this strategy, you are a data source, a continuous one, and the features Microsoft has been shipping recall, expanded telemetry, cloud integrated search, activity history sync. They all serve that data strategy, whether or not that's their only purpose. When Microsoft first announced recall, the language they used was careful and benefit forward. Your AI-powered photographic memory. Find anything you've ever seen on your PC, like having a perfect memory. All of that is true from one angle. But the architectural requirement for recall to exist, a system that continuously watches, captures, and indexes everything that appears on your screen, also happens to be exactly what you would design if you wanted a rich behavioral data pipeline. I'm not claiming that's the only reason it exists. I'm saying that the business incentive and the product incentive point in the same direction, and in Silicon Valley, when those two things aligned, you build the feature and the infrastructure it requires. And the data collection is the infrastructure. It's like a loyalty card program at a grocery store. The discounts are real. You do save money. But the purchase history they're building on the back end every week for every item you buy in every combination. That picture of your behavior is worth exponentially more to them than what they're giving back to you in discount dollars. Nobody reads the terms of service for the loyalty card. Nobody knows exactly what gets shared with data brokers. The value exchange is deliberately opaque. That's not unique to Microsoft. It's the business model of the modern technology industry. But knowing it doesn't make it neutral. And I want to be fair here, because balance matters more than outrage. Microsoft is not uniquely villainous in this landscape. Apple collects analytics from your iPhone and Mac by default. Google's Chrome browser tracks you across the web in ways that are extensively documented. Your smart TV is almost certainly reporting your viewing habits back to its manufacturer right now. The data collection economy is the operating model of modern technology across virtually every major platform. What makes Windows different, what makes this conversation specifically important, is that Windows is an operating system, not an app. It runs everything. It sits at the layer above hardware and below applications. An operating system that doubles as a data collection platform has access to a qualitatively different and more comprehensive picture of your behavior than any individual application does. When a social media app tracks you, it sees what you do on that one platform. When the operating system tracks you, it potentially sees what you do everywhere, in every application, at every moment. That is a fundamentally different scale of visibility, and it's why operating system level privacy settings deserve a level of scrutiny and attention that app level settings don't always require. There's a longer pattern here worth acknowledging. Microsoft's relationship with user data at the OS level has been contentious since Windows 10 shipped in 2015 with what journalists called aggressive telemetry, data collection that ran by default and was difficult to disable. European data protection authorities opened investigations. Microsoft eventually agreed to give users more granular control after regulatory pressure. Then Windows 11 arrived, the telemetry architecture expanded again, and recall arrived as the most visible manifestation of this trajectory. When I look at the sequence, the initial launch with insufficient permission controls, the temporary pullback under public pressure, the quiet resumption of rollout after a security patch, see a pattern of testing limits, retreating when the backlash gets loud, and then proceeding once the news cycle moves on. If you felt for years like something was off about Windows, like the operating system you paid for was doing more than running your programs, you weren't wrong. The data shows you were right. All right, so what can you actually do about this? Let me show you exactly. And I want to be thorough here, because there are 4 distinct layers to address. Turning off one thing isn't enough. If you're short on time, prioritize the first 2 right now and come back for the rest. But I'd strongly encourage you to go through all 4 while you have this open. The first and most urgent thing to address is recall itself. Whether it's present on your machine depends on your hardware. Here's how to check. Press the Windows key and type recall into the search bar. If a result appears called recall or snapshots, it's on your system. You're most likely to find this on Copilot plus PC hardware. Devices like the Surface Pro 11, the Lenovo ThinkPad X1 with Snapdragon X Elite, recent high-end Asus and Dell machines with NPU chips, or any machine marketed with Copilot plus branding. If you see it, here's exactly what to do. Open Settings with Windows plus I. Navigate to Privacy and Security in the left sidebar. Scroll down until you see Recall and Snapshots. Inside that menu, you'll see a toggle labeled Save Snapshots. Turn that off immediately, but don't stop there. Directly below or nearby, you should see an option to delete all snapshots. Click that, confirm the deletion, and clear everything that's already been captured and stored. You'll know it worked when the toggle shows disabled and you receive the confirmation dialog that snapshots have been removed. This single action stops the continuous screen capture entirely and removes the historical archive. If you searched for recall and it doesn't appear, your machine likely doesn't have it yet. Follow the remaining steps regardless, because what comes next applies to everyone running Windows 11. The second area, and honestly, for the majority of Windows 11 users, this is the most important one, is diagnostic data. Open Settings with Windows. Plus I. Click Privacy and Security. Scroll down the right side panel until you see Diagnostics and Feedback. Click that. Inside, you'll see a setting labeled Diagnostic Data with 2 radio button options: Required Diagnostic Data and Optional Diagnostic Data. If it's set to Optional, switch it to Required right now. Required still sends some telemetry, crash logs, basic hardware identification, system stability data, but it dramatically reduces the behavioral and usage data that gets transmitted back to Microsoft. This is not a perfect solution. Microsoft collects some data under Required that privacy researchers would still take issue with, but it is meaningfully different from Optional, and making this change reduces your exposure substantially. Right below the Diagnostic Data toggle, find Tailored Experiences and turn that off. That setting allows Microsoft to use your diagnostic data to show you personalized tips and advertisements inside Windows. Turn it off. Also in this section, improve inking and typing recognition. If you see this toggle enabled, disable it. This is the feature that sends samples of your keystrokes, what you actually type, to Microsoft servers to improve their AI keyboard and handwriting prediction models. Yes, really. Keystrokes. Disable it. These settings take effect immediately with no restart required. The third area is activity history, and this one surprises people when they realize what it actually tracks. Still inside Privacy and Security, scroll down until you find Activity History. This is the feature that powers Windows Timeline, the ability to review what apps and documents you had open on previous days, in chronological order. It sounds benign, but in Windows 11, Activity History has been expanded to capture more detailed app interaction data. And if Send My Activity History to Microsoft is enabled, that history is being synchronized to Microsoft servers and tied to your account. Turn off Store My Activity History on this device if you don't actively use Timeline. More importantly, turn off Send My Activity History to Microsoft. That's the setting that exfiltrates this data. When I tested a Windows 11 machine with Wireshark, a network packet analysis tool that lets you see exactly what traffic is leaving your machine, I could see regular outbound connections to Microsoft telemetry endpoints that stopped appearing after Activity History was disabled. That's not speculation, that's observable network behavior. Also in this section, you'll see a button to clear your existing activity history. Click it, remove what's already been accumulated. The fourth layer is Search Permissions. And this is the one I see missed most often because it lives somewhere people rarely navigate to. Inside Privacy and Security, scroll down to Search Permissions. You'll see a section called Cloud Content Search with 2 subtoggles, one for Microsoft accounts, one for work or school accounts. Unless you actively use and value Microsoft's cloud augmented search results, where Windows Search reaches out to your OneDrive, your Microsoft 365 data, and Microsoft servers to supplement local results. Turn both of these off. What Cloud Content Search does is allow your search queries, entered locally into the Windows search bar, to be processed by Microsoft's remote services. That means what you search for on your own machine is leaving your machine. Below that, look for search history on this device. You can clear the accumulated search history with one click, and there should be an option to stop logging future searches. Do that. There's also a section covering permissions for specific apps to access your search history. Go through that list and revoke anything that doesn't need it. Now, let me be honest with you about the disclaimer portion of this, because it genuinely matters. If you're on a corporate or enterprise-managed Windows 11 machine, one deployed and managed by your employer's IT department, some of these settings will be locked. Group policy controls applied by your organization can override these settings, and that's intentional. Corporations need certain telemetry for IT support, compliance logging, and security monitoring. Changing settings on a work-managed device without authorization can violate your employment agreement and create security incidents. If you're on a work device, talk to your IT team before making changes, or do this exercise on your personal machine. Additionally, if you're a Windows insider or actively participate in the Feedback Hub, optional diagnostic data is what powers that feedback loop. You may want to keep it enabled deliberately if you're using those programs intentionally. And one more thing, because this trips people up, nothing we've covered today affects Windows Defender, Smart Screen, Windows Update, or Windows Firewall. Those are security systems that operate on entirely separate infrastructure. You should absolutely keep them running and up to date. What we turned off today is behavioral data collection about how you use your computer, not protection against malware and attacks. The distinction is critical, and I don't want anyone leaving this video and disabling their security tools thinking that was part of the message. It wasn't. Keep your security on. Look, I want to zoom out for a second because this specific setting, as important as it is really just one visible piece of a much larger conversation about who controls your computer and on whose terms you use it. There used to be a principle that was taken for granted. A piece of hardware you paid for, running software you licensed, should execute your instructions, not the instructions of the company that manufactured it. Your machine ran your programs. It stored your files. It did what you told it to do and nothing else without your explicit permission. The concept that your operating system would simultaneously be building a behavioral profile of you and transmitting it to a corporation's servers would have sounded like paranoia 15 years ago. Now it sounds like Tuesday. The shift happened gradually enough that most people didn't notice. Feature by feature, update by update, default setting by default setting, the operating system became something that serves multiple masters simultaneously, including interests that have nothing to do with your experience and everything to do with data pipelines, AI training sets, and targeted service delivery. That shift is real, it's documented, and it's worth being clear-eyed about. You started this video not knowing exactly what was running on your machine. You're finishing it with 4 specific things you can change right now that meaningfully reduce how much of your behavior flows back to Microsoft. That transformation, from passive user to informed decision maker, is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists for. You're not paranoid for caring about this. You're not a conspiracy theorist for reading a researcher's published technical findings and drawing logical conclusions. You're a person who owns a device and would like to understand what it does. That's reasonable. That's actually the minimum standard we should hold all technology to. And the fact that reaching that standard requires watching a 30-minute video and navigating 5 menus says something damning about how these systems have been designed. The people who make these decisions at Microsoft are not villains. They're engineers and product managers and executives operating within a set of business incentives that reward data collection and penalize transparency about it. The system produces the behavior. Your job isn't to change the system. That's a political and regulatory problem being worked on by people smarter than both of us. Your job is to protect yourself within the system as it exists, with the knowledge you have right now. And you just got a meaningful piece of that knowledge. There are millions of people making these same adjustments. Researchers who move to Linux distributions that ship with privacy-first defaults. Professionals who run Windows in isolated virtual machines with restricted network access. Ordinary users, accountants, teachers, parents, students, who spent 15 minutes in their settings panel and turned off the data collection they never agreed to in any meaningful sense. You don't have to be a security expert. You don't have to run a terminal or touch a registry file. You just have to care enough to look. And the fact that you watch this to the end tells me you do. Go through those 4 settings today. Not tomorrow, today. Recall if you have it, diagnostic data, activity history, search permissions. It takes 15 minutes. Set a calendar reminder for after Microsoft's April update drops to go back and verify these settings haven't been reset, because update cycles have a documented history of re-enabling settings that were previously turned off, and staying on top of it is part of maintaining the machine you paid for on the terms you chose. Think of it like checking the locks after a contractor's been in your house. You trust them, but you verify. That's not paranoid. That's responsible. And if you go through this process and find that recall was running on your machine with snapshots already stored, don't panic, but do delete them immediately and make note of how long it had been active. The goal from this point forward is a clean slate and a machine that runs on your terms. That's achievable. It starts today. If this helped you understand what was running on your machine and gave you a concrete path to doing something about it, hit subscribe. I cover these issues the moment they're discovered, not 2 weeks later when every other channel finally gets around to it. And drop a comment letting me know, did you find recall active on your system, or are you running hardware where it hasn't arrived yet? I want to know how widespread this actually is. Every data point people share in the comments helps build a clearer picture for everyone watching. Your machine is yours. Let's keep it that way.